The Waldron program promotes the career exploration process as students do a number of different things thanks to the interdisciplinary education they receive at Weinberg. Today, we're excited to hear from 5 alumni who graduated from Weinberg between 2005 and 2010 with degrees in econ to poli-sci to sociology and more. After working for a few years post-undergrad, they went on to get MBAs from top business schools and now hold roles in a variety of industries, many different from what they were doing right after NU. Before I turn to introductions, I want to acknowledge it's been a stressful year, and we understand everyone is balancing a lot. So again, a sincere thank you for taking the time to be here today. Students, if you're able and comfortable, I would like to ask for you to turn on your videos. No pressure if you can't for any reason, but our alumni normally would be on campus looking at a room of you, and it would be nice for them to see who they're speaking to, and nice for you to have this connection. Also, I'll save the last 15 minutes of the program for student questions. You'll have an option to raise your hand and ask a question yourself, or you can send your questions to me in the chat. That's enough of me talking for the moment. Let's hear from the alumni panelists. So Elizabeth, Kevin, Sterling, Sophia, and Julie, I'm going to ask if you can please first briefly share what you studied at Northwestern and some of the meaningful activities you were involved in, where you went to business school, and then your current role, beyond your title and employer, what you actually do in your job today. We'll get into the details and in between during the program. And so then Elizabeth, can we start with you?
Sure, that's a lot to say, so remind me if I've missed something. I studied psychology and economics while I was on campus. I graduated from Kellogg. I currently manage beef buying at CrowdCow, which is a venture-funded startup Series B based out of Seattle. We're basically a farm-to-table, direct-to-consumer startup about 5 years old. I'm a giant meathead if anybody wants to talk about steaks. After Weinberg, I went into banking, and since then, after Kellogg, my entire career has been in e-commerce. So radical pivot from finance to tech, and super passionate about retail.
Great, thank you. Sterling?
Hi everyone, it's good to be here with you. I was at Northwestern 2008. I actually did a 5th year in 2009 where I did a master's in communications as a member of the basketball team. So that was my biggest extracurricular activity, or I don't even know if it's extracurricular because it was so much part of everything I did. But after Northwestern, I worked in Chicago in financial planning for 4 years. And then I did the Northwestern JD MBA program, which Kellogg kind of runs as far as the admittance. Graduated 2016. And now I'm practicing law as a corporate lawyer in Chicago, work for a firm, Greenberg Chard, and I do mergers and acquisitions and private equity work as an associate. So as far as day-to-day, outside of my title, essentially helping companies that are either buying another company or being sold with those transactions.
Thank you. Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin Salimian. I graduated from Northwestern in 2006. I studied MMSS in economics, and then I went to Harvard Business School, graduating in 2012. I've always worked in kind of finance and investing. So out of college, I worked at Morgan Stanley doing technology investment banking, and then kind of since then I've always done kind of tech finance stuff for the last 9 years as a public market and venture investor, primarily investing in technology companies.
Sophia?
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia Diaz. I graduated from Weinberg in 2008 and then got my MBA from Wharton, graduated in 2016. While at Northwestern, my major was sociology, minor business institutions. And in terms of most memorable activity, I think it was being on, I think it was called the Wildcat Welcome Week leadership board. So we helped kind of plan that freshman orientation, and that was just such a great leadership experience and seeing kind of these like happy faces when they first got to campus and being such a part of that pivotal like welcome experience was really awesome. In terms of my current role, so I work at Salesforce as a director of pricing strategy. We work with the product teams to understand what's the roadmap, what's the innovation, and how should it be monetized for our customers.
Thank you. Julie?
Hey, I'm Julie Sawaya. I graduated from Weinberg in 2010, double majored in economics and international studies, and minored in business institutions, although I often forget that. When I was at Northwestern, I think my primary activities were really, I was involved in Greek life, and then a huge amount of my time, my last year was involved in research. I wrote a economics thesis on food deserts, which kind of foreshadowed where I ended up later in my career working on the food system. And now I, after going to Stanford to get my MBA, I now run a consumer e-commerce startup that makes nutritional supplements and nutrition education content for women before, during, and after pregnancy. And then in between, I guess, undergrad and business school, I worked in private equity and private credit investing in Chicago and then out in San Francisco.
Great. I'm ready to dive into that in between. I want to take you back to the early years of your undergrad experience at Northwestern and first ask how you picked your major. And in what ways has the choice of your major influenced your career so far? And so I'll actually start with Julie this time.
Sure. So I went to Northwestern not knowing what I wanted to major in. I had a lot of different interests and took my first econ class, I think my second quarter at NU, and just loved it immediately. And I also really liked poli-sci, and I don't think I declared my major until like the end of sometime during my second year, I think, and did so sort of in combination with studying abroad. And I don't know what that looks like right now with the current global situation we're all in, but I loved the experience of studying abroad and did so in Paris, studying the what was called European Union Studies at Sciences Po in Paris. And that really influenced my decision to double major in international studies. I would say at the time, you know, I was really kind of picking a major and deciding what I wanted my career to look like during the like 2008, 2009 global recession. So I was interested in financial markets, interested in investing. And also I think there was an air of, among me and my classmates, of like job security concerns. And that definitely weighed into the, not necessarily my decision to pick a major, but what I wanted to do immediately after school. In retrospect, it's not surprising at all that I ended up in something entrepreneurial, but at the time that was not even something I thought was possible. And I know Northwestern has invested a lot in entrepreneurship programs since I was there, which is amazing. But I think at the time, I was very much thinking like, I want to get that next job, you know, immediately after school, and then somewhere down the line, probably do an MBA. But I couldn't have foreseen exactly where my career has taken me since.
Yeah, great, thank you. Sophia?
So I think when I heard the question around like, why did I pick the major? I knew I kind of wanted to go into business eventually, and I knew at least Northwestern at that time, there wasn't really this like Kellogg certificate program, which I think you have now. Very much it was, if you want to go into business, you are doing econ or MMSS. And I took some econ classes and I liked it, but I was really drawn to sociology, just the professors, the classes, they were interesting. And so I think in terms of, you know, how it plays into my current role. Like sociology is all about how like societies are formed and understanding kind of norms and cultures, and that kind of skill set, like that's kind of definitely been relevant in any role that I've been in, like landing at a company, understanding like how the people interact, what forms the cultures and the norms, but I couldn't have charted that out or known that by any means. And I was just really drawn to the classes that and the professors that I interacted with through sociology.
Great, yeah. Sterling?
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that Julie and Sophia found their majors and they loved them, because I did not enjoy my major. Well, I almost I didn't enjoy it, but I kind of fell into my major. So if anyone is in a similar boat, then I can identify with you. I was interested going into college in, business, maybe finance, or even accounting. I took an accounting class in high school. And when I went to visit Northwestern, I went for basketball. I found out that they didn't have those majors. I remember my dad he apologized to me because he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, son. I didn't know that either." So, Northwestern is a liberal arts school. My thinking is that they want you to go on and specialize either by doing graduate school or just doing a deeper dive into a particular subject, especially if it's business related. And so I met a couple of alumni who played basketball, who majored in political science, and they got into business. And so I just kind of followed that path. And similar to Sophia, when I graduated, it was 2008, and so there was a crisis, the economic crisis, financial crisis. And so I think finding work was a little different than I thought it would be. I thought I would have a few more options than I did. And things worked out, but picking my major, I kind of fell into. And so that's a part of the reason why I looked into business school more thoughtfully, more carefully, because I didn't have as much of the hardcore skill set that you would get, even though my interest was in business. Another way I offset that was through internships. I had a couple of internships, which maybe we'll get into later, during the summers of undergrad that helped.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Gonna be in Camp Sterling here. I was an econ major, hated it entirely, but thought that I should pursue econ because I was interested in banking. It probably finance major would have been where I should have been. And so I pursued that a bit more during my Kellogg years. But I think totally that I loved banking more than my econ degree. And so sometimes your major can lead you to where you want to go, even if you don't particularly care for the major. I also double majored in psychology, which I studied a bit more organizational behavior during my MBA, and that I found extremely useful. I've changed careers and functions multiple times since I've graduated business school, and I think that both of those degrees have absolutely opened doors. I pursued MBA because of coming out of Northwestern, maybe without exactly the skill set that I wanted. And my perception of MBA, which I think holds true even more so today, is that it is the most well-rounded degree. If you want to be a generalist, if you want to specialize, you can flex your degree in both ways. My career has been, up until now, more generalist in nature. And so I've done a variety of functions that I think would be a little bit difficult without the MBA degree. So I guess in retrospect, that is that's the power of a liberal arts degree, is that it gives you, I think everyone so far has spoken to the power of exploration and discovery. Is if you know exactly what you want, you can go and pursue it. But if you don't, equally so much potential for you to learn along the way.
Kevin?
Yeah, I think Sterling and Elizabeth's experiences somewhat resonate with me too. Although I don't know if I would have studied business in undergrad. So I ended up studying MMSS and econ really because, I grew up in a family, and a bit of an immigrant family, and I also grew up in California, where we have really good public universities that are a lot less expensive than Northwestern. And so, my parents were like, why are you going to this really expensive private school in, 2,000 mile away and leaving us? And so, and my dad is an engineer, and my mom's a big believer in engineering too. So, and I wasn't studying engineering. And so, this was kind of the most technical degree I could get in Weinberg that wasn't, something like physics or where I would really have trouble, I think. But, and so that's why I did MMSS and econ. But honestly, like, I am a math person, but I don't know if I was MMSS quality math. And I think it was a great experience because I got a really structured, to this day, when you're investing in companies, you have to have a thesis and then you have to prove that thesis. It's not that different than writing a really good English paper, but it's also not that different than proving something in math class. And so just that structured approach, I think, has been very helpful. Sometimes when I work with like younger people, when they're a little bit less structured, I'm like, well, maybe it's just because I took MMSS and dealt with all those hard times, and maybe that was really helpful to me. So, but I think in terms of like true business experience, I got a lot more kind of like Elizabeth from my investment banking experience. I mean, you work incredibly hard, but you just get such a great kind of general purpose education. I think you do it from management consulting and other things too that Northwestern can feed into. And so I'd agree that I think the class that I got the most out of at Northwestern for the students in the room, frankly, for the rest of my life, was actually Gary Morson's Russian literature class, which I don't know if anyone else took, but I still think about that class sometimes. I've emailed them a few times when I've been reading other books, but it was really not really a Russian literature class. It was like a class on how to live your life. And I think that was probably the most impactful to me on, family life, learning how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, learning how to be a good coworker, friend. I mean, it was just an incredibly powerful class. And I got a lot out of it, which I probably wouldn't have gotten, if I'd studied finance or something like that.
Yeah, I took that class too, so it's a good one.
It is, yeah.
Some of you touched a little bit about what you did right after undergrad before business school, but I'm wondering if you could share a little more about that in-between time and what your decision was around attending business school, like why you wanted to go and what you think are good reasons to go. Any answer around there. And Kevin, I'll start with you this time.
Sure, yeah. So out of college, I did investment banking and private equity, and I got a ton out of that experience. But I had kind of just interest in going to graduate school. I didn't feel like, I don't think it was needed to continue down my career path. So I work at a hedge fund, and I actually, just to test that, after I got into business school, I applied to a few hedge funds and had a few opportunities. And frankly, in the industry I'm in, I would call it roughly half the people have an MBA and half don't. And there's places that only hire an MBA, and there's places that only hire people who don't have an MBA. So there's no like requirement to do it. So it was a hard decision, but in the end, I decided to go to business school, in part because I didn't study business in undergrad. And so I thought kind of a general business education would be helpful. And I also felt like I would learn a lot from other people's experiences, because the nice thing about business school is everyone worked beforehand. And so you just learn from people who did things that weren't, frankly, in finance. They did things in marketing, or they did things as entrepreneurs, or in general management. So those are the reasons I did it. I ended up getting, I think, a ton out of it. A lot of people think you don't get a lot academically out of business school. I actually got a lot out of it academically, because you can just choose courses. In my case, in the second year especially, you have like complete elective choices. And so it was just great just to take things that were in subjects I just didn't know much about, or that I knew a little bit about, but I wanted to learn from other people in the classroom and from the professors. So that was kind of the thought process for why I went to business school.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I'll go to you now. We're going to go back the other way.
So I was in banking right after Weinberg, and knew that I probably was going to leave finance. I went into banking thinking that I was headed to law school. So I took the LSAT before I ever took the GMAT. And it was actually upon getting my LSAT score, which was pretty compelling, that I then realized, is this actually the path that I want to take? And kind of aligned to, I think the power of businesses to transform and to create value for people and solve really hard problems is what gravitated me towards business. When I applied to Kellogg, I did think that I was interested in marketing. And that's the one function that I have disliked the most of all the functions that I've pursued. But I think that's, again, I went to business school kind of attracted to the fact that it opens the most diverse set of doors by putting you in the most diverse set of people. And I would say that the courses that Kevin referenced, there's the power of that as well as the power of the people in the seats that are right next to you. Kellogg, and I'm sure most folks, regardless of the schools they went to, your MBA kind of accompanies you every step of your career afterwards. Kellogg has been directly involved with each kind of company that I've worked with since graduation. And I graduated, similar to what Sterling said, I graduated started 08, so kind of when the markets completely died. So it was incredibly hard landing an internship. In 2010, we were still in recession. And so when you kind of go through those times, it really teaches you how to access and leverage your alumni network that becomes a part of you the rest of life. So most of us have probably moved cities, moved companies multiple times since graduation. And I think it's hard to understate how powerful the MBA is part of that experience.
Sterling?
Yes, well, I don't think I could say any better than Elizabeth did as far as the power of business school and what you can learn. And so I want to co-sign everything she stated. I worked in financial planning. So again, it was 2009 when I started, and I got a lot of my experience. So I was in the, it was a sales role where I'm working with individuals, and I had a business client actually, which was administering their retirement plan and their group insurance, but mostly working with individuals on their financial planning. So, retirement planning, protection as far as insurance goes, short-term investing, college planning, all those things that, at age 22 or 23, it is a challenge to talk to people who are in their 30s, 40s, or even their 20s about these kinds of things, because you are just getting started. But after you kind of get used to doing some cold calls, which I hated doing, I did that from the beginning, or you talk to a few people and you get past your initial uneasiness or not knowing what the products say, but when you get to the core of helping people solve their problems, I began to enjoy the work a lot. I think I had an interest in business, as I mentioned earlier, and so I was able to kind of combine aspects of finance, marketing, compliance, insurance, investing, all in the one role. I think the issue for me was it became inefficient to be 23, 24 and doing this on my own, as opposed to maybe working with a team or having more mentorship. The company I was with was a great company, but they kind of let you figure out yourself, which is both good and bad. So when I first started, I thought I'd go to business school part-time and continue doing what I was doing for the rest of my career. That was my original plan. And by the time I got to about year 3, I realized, or I kind of saw that I really wanted to expand my knowledge base, expand my network. And I say network, and that's another discussion. I don't mean like in a cheesy way of meeting people just for the sake of doing it, but just getting to know people, understand their experiences, that pursuing business school full time would be worthwhile. So I was very thoughtful about my application process in the business school. Another thing we can talk about later, because business school applications are their own thing. And I enjoy talking about the process because I think the more information you have in that regard is helpful. So, but the original question, I worked in financial planning. I enjoyed it. And when I applied to business school, I applied thinking I would do kind of a general management role. Kellogg's MBA is kind of set up for you to become that general manager, and you get exposed to a little bit of everything, is the idea. So you can communicate with the marketing team, finance team, the accounting team. You are working on as a team. It's about teamwork and leadership. And then if you want to do a deep dive into a certain subject, you can do that as well. So found the MBA helpful. We'll see if Amanda wants to talk about some of the other things about applications or the value of an MBA, because I think there's a lot of discussion about the value of an MBA versus just going and doing something or starting a company. I think that's a worthwhile discussion. But yeah, the process was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Next question will be about admissions process. Read my mind. Sophia?
So in between graduating from Northwestern and going to business school, I went into management consulting. I did that for 6 years, lived life on the road Monday through Thursday. That was pretty difficult. And I knew I kind of needed that professional break, to be honest. And I'll talk about the reasons why I ended up going to business school, but transparently, that was kind of the first reason. In terms of why consulting, for me, it was really about and it served its purpose around building confidence, solving a lot of different kinds of problems. And this concept of being comfortable with the uncomfortable, you are a really junior person dropped into different industries in different places, solving different problems, working with really senior stakeholders. And each problem was like somewhat different. Each industry was somewhat different, but you start to pick up this pattern recognition of, you know, these are the different issues I'm seeing. These are the frameworks that we're using. This is how we're peeling back the onion and solving a problem. And that was really invaluable. So I really loved those 6 years. It helped me build that confidence around problem solving. But the job does evolve from analyst to associate to manager, director, partner. Each level that you go to in consulting, it's a very different role. And so I knew I wanted to leave right when I was kind of around promotion for manager. And I was like, this is no longer the life for me. I don't really want to be doing this. Living life on the road, Monday through Thursday, working crazy hours was not appealing to me. And so I knew I wanted to go get my MBA. In terms of the reasons that drove that, one was I needed that professional break. I wanted a chance to explore a new path, also to take a time out and just like think about what I had learned about myself, my leadership style in the last 6 years. It is so different to go from undergrad and then have work experience and be around peers that have had different types of work experiences, and then learn about yourself and others and in a simulation environment. Like it's a richer experience having that 6 years of professional life under your belt. And then I think a couple of other reasons why I wanted to go to business school was, you know, a few of us on this call are very much, or all of us on this call are really liberal arts backgrounds. And to be honest, like I knew I wanted to go into business. Sociology as a major, it did come up in interviews like, oh, sociology, and like, tell me about your thesis. Would love to learn about it. I wrote this like quantitative thesis on microfinancing, but I felt like I needed to have that stamp on my resume of, okay, like you went to business school, you have that quantitative aspect, because I felt like the sociology aspect needed to be rounded out with that quantitative element. And then I think the last piece was expanding my network, and similar to what Sterling said, not in that cheesy way, but these are people that you are in the trenches with, you're learning about each other, you're talking about vulnerable things, it's a really transformative experience. And there's just this multiplier effect when you know, like, I've gone through what you've gone through, and anytime someone reaches out to me from Wharton, whether I know them really well or not, or they were a different year, I always take the call because you kind of know that you have that bonded experience.
Great. Julie?
Yeah, so I took the GMAT my spring quarter of my senior year because everyone was doing it, or a lot of people were doing it, or taking the LSATs around the same time. And business school was something that I thought I might want to do down the road, but I didn't really know like what would happen between job one and business school. So I took a job after Northwestern working in private credit investing in Chicago, and it was supposed to be a like a 3-year analyst program, but it wasn't an up and out, meaning you didn't have to leave. You could continue on and be promoted. And I ended up leaving there after only about a year to go join kind of a startup fund that was, I think, Kevin, I think we actually overlapped at TPG. I was in the credit group, and basically a group was newly started. It had this entrepreneurial feel, and it was really fast growing. So I went and joined as one of the early members of that group. And similarly, like there was no, if anything, it was a liability that I wanted to go to business school. I was the second person in our group to go to get an MBA, and the only person who was transparent about it during the application process. And I felt like it was a really hard decision to leave something that's steady and where you don't have to leave and where you are growing and learning and like the sky is the limit. But I just knew that I wanted to pursue something entrepreneurial. And I just felt like, I also wanted leadership skills that I was not getting in private equity. I was always the like youngest person on the team. And so was getting experience like managing up, kind of like working with people who were senior to me, but no direct experience managing anyone my age. And I don't know, I think I just had the entrepreneurial bug moving out to San Francisco. There was just so many people working for tech companies, and that was really exciting to me. So mine was kind of a pragmatic decision. I was my GMAT score that I was happy with was set to expire. And it also felt like the right time in my career to leave. It was like, what they call like golden handcuffs. It becomes harder and harder to leave a well-paying job the longer you stay there. So for a few reasons, mostly practical, and then also this like instinct that I was meant to start a company, I decided that an MBA was the next right step.
Okay.
And I worked a total of 5 years. So I really do agree with Sophia's advice that working for several years really is helpful. And I think from my class at Stanford, those of us who worked for like 4 to 6 or 4 to 7 years, I think we just, and this is generalized, but it seemed like we came in with more of a clear idea of what we wanted to get out of it versus working only 2 years or 3 years and viewing it more like, well, I'm just gonna see what happens. And not that either one is wrong, but you can be really targeted if you know what you want to get out of an MBA. You can get a super specific experience out of it, which in my case was what I wanted.
Okay, so y'all decided to go to business school. The admissions can be competitive. The application process can be intense. So what are some tips to these undergrads who are looking to apply in a few years from now? And we'll start with Julie this time and go the other way.
Yeah, so admissions wise, the private equity firm that I was at has good relationships with a lot of the MBA schools, which is helpful. I kind of did a little bit of like navigating it myself because my group wasn't very plugged in. Nobody from my group had gone, but the firm overall was pretty supportive of getting an MBA. So there was like, I'm trying to think of specific, I didn't use like an MBA admissions consultant, but I think I did have a couple people at the firm advise on the strategy of where to apply and what order to apply and how, I think just emphasizing how important the essays are and being clear on what you want to get out of the schools. I ultimately decided to apply first round to Stanford, and then my plan was going to be to apply to other schools second round. The reason being the person at my private equity firm who kind of like managed the relationships felt it was really compelling to be able to say, this is the only school I've applied to, and if I get accepted, I'm going to go. And so I decided to do that. And I knew I knew that Stanford was where I wanted to go because of the entrepreneurial. The two things I wanted to get out of the MBA was like, how do I start a company? And you don't need to go to business school to start a company, to be clear, but I felt like I needed that to expand my network and to like learn the ins and outs of actually running a company. And then the second thing I really wanted was leadership. And I felt like Stanford did a great job at both of those. So for me, it was a good choice to apply and be able to say with conviction, this is the only school I've applied to. And then I have a backup. If I don't get in, I can apply elsewhere. And I started those processes, but didn't like actually submit an application yet. Yeah, I guess I'm glad that it worked out, but I think we were talking, the group of us before the call started, and my husband went to a different business school, went to Kellogg. And so seeing him go through the application process, he applied to multiple schools his first round. And I guess what I want to reiterate is like, there's no wrong way to approach it. I think if you know what school you really want to go to, there can be advantages to being able to say that. But I don't think there's any wrong way to approach MBA admissions other than maybe, most people will say don't apply round 3 because there are fewer spots in that round.
Sophia, any tips from your experience?
Yeah, so I agree with that point around strategically using the 3 rounds. I knew my heart was probably in Kellogg or Wharton, so I applied to those 2 in the beginning, and it just so happened to work out. In terms of other tips, I think, think about why business school is necessary in your journey. And I think it's really hard to mentally shift from like 6 years of working in slides and bullet points to then articulating this like essay where they also want you to be vulnerable and reflect on failures. Like, it takes a mental shift. So I would say, reach out to people, learn about what other people have written about. There are books out there. You can go on Amazon and buy like business school essay books that you can just see examples. And so one of the best things I did was actually get one of those books just to see, like, I need to retrain my brain. I'm in this like Excel bullet point slide making world right now. Like, I need to extract myself from that, think about my journey and what I've learned, and frame up my essay. And like, it's not just about the GMAT. And I think it's super smart to take the GMAT while in school. I think that's a great hack. Your brain is working differently later in life. So if you're in that school mode, capitalize on that. But the application itself is like a whole other piece. So don't sell that short. It's definitely the whole package, and you want to use each question as an opportunity for the admissions folks to learn something new about you. So don't throw it away. Don't leave the essays just to the last minute, focusing entirely on the GMAT, because it's not just about that. Yeah, I think that's it in terms of my tips.
Thanks. Elizabeth?
I think echoing Sophia, and actually really want to echo what Julie said about the work experience. I went after 3 years. If I would do it over again, I would have given myself 2 more years before going. I did come out of a rotational program, and so I did work in different environments with different microcultures, but I was at one company prior to Kellogg. And I think even if you could work for 2 companies, that actually would be great going to business school, just to give yourself difference in benchmarks of what you enjoy or thrive in. And so I think that is great advice. But I think when I applied, similar to Sterling, was more interested in a general management approach. I had 2 of my mentors were both Kellogg alum. They absolutely colored the experience. There were several Kellogg and Booth alum at the bank that I worked at. And so that was kind of my reference point. And just in speaking with the alum on their experiences, I found myself more gravitating towards the Kellogg experience overall. Really wanted to understand, what does it mean, peer leadership and leadership? Like, how do you develop those leadership skills, particularly in tech, where you work with several cross-functionals, definitely in marketing as well. to be able to understand how do you speak to ops, or how do you speak to finance, or how do you speak to legal, was kind of what I was looking for. If I did it over again, I would try to find alumni from different schools and specifically ask them why that school. Because if you go to different prospective sessions, they all start to sound somewhat similar, but the more personal you can get with an alumni on what did you love, and if there was one thing you wish the school did differently, what would it be? And if they're willing to tell you that, I think you'll be able to figure out if that's the school for you.
Kevin?
Yeah, I think all of the advice given so far, I think was great. And, you know, I think the one thing I would just add about business school is there is also an okay answer to not go. And I actually got a ton out of the experience, but, you know, if you want to become a lawyer, right, like Sterling became a lawyer, then of course you have to go to law school. And if you want to become a doctor, you got to go to medical school. Business, there's a lot of really successful people in business, whether in, you know, in all of our fields that didn't go to business school, right? And then really successful people who did. So I think the first question to really think about, even though I got a lot out of it, is do you really want to go? And is it really going to have a positive impact on your career versus whatever else you're doing? And I've had conversations with younger friends or family friends that, you know, sometimes based on their work, I'm like, if you really love what you're doing, then you don't need to break it off, right? If, you know, you already know what you want to do and it doesn't seem like it necessarily benefits from an MBA, don't feel like you have to go just to get a graduate degree. And then for other people who, for whatever reason, they want to make some big career switch, or they really need a break, or they really want the academic experience because like us, they studied something in the liberal arts, then go for it. So I think that'd be the first piece of advice I would give, is like to really think hard about that and not rush it, because I think just like Elizabeth just said, you know, whether you go, it's almost better, and Julie, I think, mentioned it too, like it's almost better to go with more experience than less. I think the people with 2 years experience really get the least out of it because they're just like fresh out of college. And I think I would have gotten even more out of it if I had done it after 5 or 6 years than after 4 years. So I would say that's the first piece of advice. And then second, you know, the answer may be you want to go, but only if it's certain schools or certain, you know, regions of the country, because at that stage in your life, you know, maybe you have a significant other or other personal things that impact it. So I would think through all that. And then for the actual application process, my experience was similar to Julie's because we worked at the same firm, and it was just, we were kind of given the advice to kind of pick the school we really want to go to and really focus on that. The one thing I would say is I found valuable from that also was that business school applications just felt like they were a lot more work than undergraduate applications. You know, like undergraduate, I was going to apply, I did early decision to Northwestern, but I was going to apply to like 20 more schools if I didn't get in. I don't think that's a good strategy for business school. I think it's like and the multiple stages also helps, like figure out like your top 2 choices, and just those 2 plus working is a lot of work. And I felt like I had no free time for a period of time. Plus if you're doing the GMAT too, because you weren't smart enough to do it in college, like Julie, like it's even harder, right? Because you're like doing, you know, 10th grade math again, and you don't remember how to do it. So I think all of that stuff is just stuff I would think about, and just fewer applications, do a really good job on them. Also, your references need to invest a lot of time in the application, a lot more than college references, and they're generally like working and probably don't really want to be doing it either, but they want to help you out. And so asking them, and each of them has a slightly different format, so you kind of asking them to write 1 or 2 is very different than write like 10 references for me. The quality will just go down. So that's what I would recommend.
Sterling, what would you like to add?
Yes, I agree with everything everyone said. You know, I think to build on Kevin's point about thinking about why, I think you want to think about that. And if you decide that business school is for you, then you want to figure out how you're going to incorporate that answer into your application, because the application is kind of holistic. It kind of all flows together. You have your GMAT, you have your resume, which they look at. You have your essays, you have the interview, and you have your letters of recommendation. And in addition to the essays, you actually have the actual application, which is, it took me a long time just to get through the application. I spent a lot of time just kind of going through where'd you work? They ask, where'd your parents work? Where'd you live? And so just the time to do that, as Kevin mentioned, you're working still, you have a life, or you want to have a life. That takes a lot of time. And so you want to have a story that kind of flows together. All the parts that you're putting in need to kind of come together to say, this is who I am, this is what I've done, here's what I'm going to benefit, here's why your school is going to benefit from having me be part of the class, and then here's what I want to do afterwards. So each part of your application kind of has that kind of flow and rhythm, and they kind of all add to it. So, once you've thought about what it is you want to do, then you probably want to give yourself a little time to think about how you want to put it together. And what I mean is, if you haven't done the GMAT in undergrad, where Julie did, then you might want to just take some time just to do the GMAT before you apply. So this might be 2 years before you apply, when you study and take the GMAT. You may take it more than once. Then after you get the GMAT score you like, then it might be thinking about the actual schools. The last thing I'll add is, I think it's helpful to visit the schools. You don't have to do it, but building on the point of talking to alumni from schools, you really want to get a feel for students, the feel of the school. I also found it helpful to incorporate that into my essays. The questions are going to be something that are, unique to the school, something fun. If you can incorporate something about the school as specific, a certain room or a certain professor or a certain club into your answer, and it shows that you've been there, that's helpful. And having been involved in Kellogg's admissions in school and after school, if the admissions officers know your name and face, it only helps.
I want to open the program to student questions. Students, you can add them in the chat, or if you want to ask them yourself, you can use the raise your hand function. I actually already got one question. Oh, so we'll start with Javier. You want to ask your question?
Yes. So I wanted to ask about if any of you looked at any other higher level degrees. I know there's things like masters in finance and stuff like that. So I don't know if any of you looked at those, or if you did, if you still chose to go to a traditional business school.
I did not. I was looking only at MBAs, but I don't know if anyone else did.
Yeah, likewise, at that point, I was looking to transition out of finance being my primary day-to-day. So was looking more for the I think you can kind of think of an MBA as being a little bit like a liberal arts education, but for business, where you can specialize in finance if you want. The business school I went to doesn't have majors, some do, but you can get out of an MBA, I think, something pretty specific. I really want to go deep on finance or investing. For me, the appeal was being able to have kind of a broader skill set coming out.
I looked into it a little bit. The thing, at least from people I heard that did it, a lot of them ended up still thinking they needed to get an MBA for that kind of general experience. And there's no real job that is looking for the master's in finance degree, while some are looking for the MBA. And there's less of a learning from your peers perspective, would just be my perspective. I mean, we're a biased group. We all went to business school, but at least that's what I heard when I looked into it.
I would echo that, just that I wasn't looking for another intensely academic experience as an econ major. And so for me, as practical as the education could be is really what I was targeting for myself.
Yeah, business and law school are two I looked at. There are people who do the masters and then go to business school afterwards, if it makes sense for you. But that's another part of, that's not to the point of being thoughtful of what you think you want to do.
We have another question. A number of you work in the startup space. Julie, you're a founder. Elizabeth, you work for a startup. Kevin, you invest in technology. What skills the student wants to know do you think are most important for running a startup? This is a little bit off of the MBA, but I want to make sure I get to this question. And what's your advice to young entrepreneurs?
I'm happy to start, but I think that depends really on the kind of startup you want to run. So my advice for starting a company would be similar to kind of the business school process in terms of being really intentional about what is it that you're looking to build, and then right size everything else based on that. Like, one skill set that can be really important is being able to communicate a vision and raise money, or communicate a vision and hire employees. But depending on the kind of business you want to run, you might not need to raise money or hire employees. Maybe you want to just engage contractors and bootstrap the company. I think an MBA the MBA program I went to prepared me well for kind of the foundations of running any sized company. Like, how do you have difficult conversations? How do you manage, a P&L? How do you do kind of basic marketing? How do you do basic operations? What does it look like to raise money? And so coming out, I think I had a pretty broad taste for what the different components would look like. But I will say, I think the MBA education overlaid with entrepreneurship has a tendency to emphasize hiring a team as a litmus for like a startup's growth. And I wish coming out of the MBA that there had been a little bit more of a emphasis on alternative ways of running a business. Like, it's not all SaaS companies that grow and scale and become these huge businesses with thousands of employees. Some companies, like the industry I'm in, I think they overhire and they over raise money, and that's not maybe the best way to run a company in the e-commerce sector. So I'm happy to go into anything more specific if anyone wants to reach out. I love talking about entrepreneurship and starting companies, but I would say start with the problem that you're looking to solve with your company and what you want your day-to-day life to look like. And that, I think, is the best way to determine what skills are you looking to, what skills do you need to kind of augment in order to run that company.
I kind of would echo that with, you have to know your why more fiercely in the startup context than almost anywhere else. Because if you don't know your why, you can't pitch it, and you have to be able to pitch it. So fundraising at the end of the day is glorified sales in a very specific context. So people have used the word network. I don't care if you want to use the word community or world or whatever word you're more comfortable with, but knowing who you know, you have to be cognizant of who you know if you're a founder, how you leverage, how you access opportunity, which is not just funds, right? But fundraising is a critical piece of that. And your investors, no matter how your board looks like, they want to know your why. And why does your why matter? Like, yes, your market size is X. How do you, your company, fit into that picture? And why is it we should invest in you versus X other companies of all shapes and sizes? Knowing your why is an exercise of discipline. And so if you believe that you are a very focused person, keep exercising that, because that is a superpower. There's always the urgent and the important, and in startup land, you have to focus on the super important. All the important goes to die. And so I think your power to say no, your ability to say no it just outweighs almost any other power that you have to be able to focus on what you must solve, like your company, you're as founder. And I think the exercise of fundraising is different in every series because your investors change, but also your network will help you in terms of knowing what your pitch needs to look like for every round. And so your network is not just your investors, but it is also your advisors, how you should be the key constant for any startup is change. So what is it that you are constantly letting things die in order to keep one thing alive? And so those people will tell you these other things need to die, and you have to be comfortable letting that go.
Okay. Try to squeeze in one more question. Might have to wrap it up quickly though. Someone is wanting to know about the MBA. They saw the MBA applications have increased a lot because of the pandemic, and they're relating it to the 2008 financial crisis, job insecurity concerns. Any thoughts about the value of going to business school during a time like this? Just quick answers, and then we'll have to wrap up in a few minutes.
I can jump in, and if anyone wants to add anything, please go ahead. So a few of us were talking before we all hopped on, and we were talking about, oh my gosh, like what would it be like to get an MBA right now? Because it is such a big investment of time and money. The opportunity cost of going to get an MBA is a lot. It's $1 million decision. I'll just be totally transparent. And to go when you can't necessarily have that full experience we were talking about just how pivotal being able to network and collaborate and meet people is such a big part of it. I hat tip to anyone who is going through an MBA experience in this virtual world. I just think knowing that how full the experience can be when you are in person and not in a global pandemic, I think I would have a really hard time, quite frankly, making that investment of time and money to go right now. But again, it kind of goes back to your why and how it fits into your why.
I think the world will also be opening by the time, hopefully, any of you would start. I would like to hope. But yeah, I really feel for the people who ended up in business school during this pandemic. I agree with Sophia. I mean, they didn't know, obviously, but if I was starting this fall, I probably would have asked for a deferral if I could have and done some internship or continued in a prior job, because the whole value is those interactions, and it's not networking, as everyone was saying earlier. I think Sterling was the one who was saying it. It's not networking in this like sense of some sort of formal thing. It's just more just like learning from people's experiences is the most valuable part of business school. And some of those experiences are the professors' experiences, because many of them worked as well, or they've experienced from academia, but a lot of it's from your classmates. And that's the difference versus undergrad, where I guess people have different life experiences, but your classmates don't have some like extra experience for you professionally yet, because no one's worked really yet. But that's the unique part of business school, is like you have a classmate who, I had classmates who were in war in Afghanistan. They learned about how to lead, troops to battle, right? And how to negotiate with the Taliban. And then you have classmates who started a company before business school and failed, so they decided to come back. You learn so much from that experience. And most of those conversations are over a drink or a coffee, or in the dorm hallways. So you just miss out on that if you're worried about social distancing.
With that, we are out of time, and apologies that we weren't able to get to all of the questions that were asked. A reminder for the students on the call: we typically order you lunch when we're doing this in person. So instead, you'll be getting an email from Grubhub next week with a $20 credit that is good for a limited time. So get that in. I just want to do one more quick thank you to our alumni for joining us for today's session. Appreciate you all for taking the time to be here and for sharing your insights as students today. I know, Julie, you mentioned you're happy to continue the conversation offline if anyone students want to reach out. Sophia's nodding too. So we can share your LinkedIn profiles with the students and they can connect with you there. All right, everyone, have a great rest of the day and a wonderful weekend, and go Cats.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.